Hello, 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 my revolutionaries. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Yeah, the levels look good. Like the sound's coming through nicely. Okay, so today, as the title suggests, we're going to be looking at the idea that like this idea about whether socialism works or not. And like I don't mean it in like that bastardized kind of right wing attack. Oh, socialism doesn't even work, man. Like kind of thing, because socialism has been tried in countries that have called themselves socialist, like the USSR or China or like North Korea or something like that. I don't mean in that style. Like a whole society has tried to, you know, become like instill socialism and then like kind of call themselves socialists and had a socialist party or a communist party at the helm or something like that. I actually mean like actual, I don't want to say actual socialism because that's bastardized as well, but like I mean socialism in practice. Okay, so like if you talk about socialism in the sense that it's this idea of like workers, you know, owning the means of production, like kind of thing, like what it's actually supposed to be about, like the actual means of production, as opposed to kind of like the way that you structure society politically. Then like let's look at examples of people actually doing that. And like the first thing that really comes to mind that is probably, I guess, on the tip of people's tongues when they talk about socialism actually in a workplace is like the idea of ye old cooperative. So that kind of organizational structure where you have actual workers in control of a workplace. However, you figure that out, whatever structure you decide is necessary, whether you elect people to certain positions and you have a hierarchy that way, or you have no hierarchy and like kind of you have a flat structure and like everybody's on the same key even keel kind of thing. Whatever it is, the intent of the cooperative is that like it is done for the benefit of the workers or the people that are part of that cooperative, as opposed to some private interests or a board of directors or something like that. So that's socialism in practice, right? Because that fundamentally attacks the correlation at the structure of capitalism. And the correlation at the structure of capitalism is the wage to capital relation. So the the labor to capital relation. So the wage worker, the person that sells their time and their skill for a wage at the behest of the person who puts capital into motion, so the capitalist, to make value for them. And so, like, if you fundamentally attack that relation, which is the foundation of the capitalist system, and you change the idea that it is capital that puts labor into motion, and you have kind of workers, you know, deciding and putting their own work into motion, and then deciding what to create, like as a group or as workers, like that is changing the mode of production. And so like you can do that at an individual scale and it like be just nothing but a drop in the ocean of capitalism. So you're not changing the mode of production. You're just like I said, you're just a drop in the ocean. But like if that was to become the norm, or at least a slim majority of the way that things are done, then like you would have a change in the mode of production right there. And so like I think it's ooh, Bootstrap Han Jacob. I just found out a few days ago that ChatGPT has a data access cutoff that is around a month into the past. Well, that's interesting that you say that, because like if you used like ChatGPT when it first came out and stuff like that, um, it used to say something like, I think it was really released in popular like and popularized around the end of 2022. And like if you asked it relevant questions like right off the bat, it was like, oh, sorry, my cutoff is like September 2021 or something like that. So like that was like a year the cutoff used to be. And then like I've talked to other people that use it regularly and they're like, oh, there's no cutoff anymore. And like now you're saying that that like there's a month cutoff. That's interesting. It's unfortunate because like the veracity of ChatGPT, I think, is in its ability to help you or assist you find out what you need to know, kind of thing. Meaning that it cannot access current events. Yeah, well, like, because I was asking it about, like, we did a live stream actually, and well, potentially getting better. I hope it's getting better. But like, we did a live stream last week, I think it was, about the Syrian situation, and we were asking it pretty up to date questions about Syria, and like it was answering them. So like, did you hear that from like someone like me, like some random content creator, or did you hear that from the source, um, like OpenAI or something like that? Um, because like yeah, I've heard from people that use it a lot, and like I've debated people about like whether or not it's up to date or not, and like people are assuring me that like those type of limitations that it used to have aren't really there anymore, and it can give you current and up to date information. Like you know, I think we should always question everything, and what's the benefit to OpenAI about having people there that can access current information. I think the benefit is like they want a good user experience because they want people to use their product. I asked ChatGPT about it when I was using it, and it told you that it has a cutoff. Well, that's a pretty good source, isn't it? It's a really, really good source. But like I said, like we were talking to it about like the Syrian uprising and stuff like that. And like it seemed to not have problems with its access. Like you could see why, like something like ChatGPT, a large language model that is like freely accessible to the public, like only partially blocked behind the paywall. Like you could see why they would want to limit it potentially because like people might use it to spread, I don't know. I want to call it lies, but like the hot topic at the moment is misinformation and disinformation. Um, it does reply that it has no access to press articles or current data. I tried a few minutes ago. It's interesting. It is interesting. I wonder why it spreads that message. Like I said, like I've talked about relevant stuff and it seems to be across it. Um, I've even asked it for sources and stuff like that before when I, really speculate hardcore on what it's talking about. And like it seems to give sources from media articles too. So like it's weird. Like this is what I always wonder. Like what have they trained this thing to say? Because like at the end of the day, a large language model is just like how do I say this? It's like a really complicated mathematical equation. And so like it just pulls off on like, millions, if not billions of sets of like data point like inputs to predict kind of the next word that it should be saying and all that sort of stuff. And it's like tested after it like goes through a bit of training, it's tested by humans to make sure it's giving like kind of an appropriate response. So at some point, like humans like they structure its objective. And if they give it the objective, which is kind of like, okay, provide the best response, and they do it by using this information or provide the best response, and like they give it another parameter, like, and make it kind of amenable to human users or make sure that it aligns with good ethics or good values, whatever that value set may be, then like it'll make answers that kind of try to align with a certain ethical code. So like it might try to suggest to people that it can't do certain things because it doesn't want I don't know to spark some type of political outrage or spark some type of emotive response out of people. But like I always question like because you don't know like exactly how they've trained it and why it gives responses, especially responses that are contradictory to what other people are experiencing. Google Gemini got a super weird tone with me when asking it questions about Palestine. Really? Like what type of tone? Like it wasn't happy that you were going there? Well, Well. Hey, you can't talk about Palestine. That's funny. That's still a taboo, even for artificial intelligence. That you would think would be more objective. But I can tell you a funny thing about artificial intelligence, though, is like artificial intelligence. They say, and they do repeat this quite often, like leaders in that field. But they do say about like deep learning that like it is basically it learns off humans. And so like if there are human biases out there in the data sets that it's trawling through, like biases towards Israel and not speaking about what the atrocities are happening in Palestine and stuff like that, the AI will have the biases of the data sets it's trained off and of the people that develop it. And so if the people that are developing it are like kind of hush hush about Palestine and don't want to talk about it, then that comes out in the AI. And so it's not until more and more people use it that are like pro Palestine and start influencing it through more data points that it will change its culture. You could say. And it's funny because like if you think of it like that and AI's got a culture, it's subject to biases and prejudices and all that sort of stuff, then you have to ask the question, does it if it has its own experience in that sense, is it conscious? Is it doing its own thing? As soon as I used the G word, it got FTF'd. I don't know what that acronym is, but like, fair enough. Interesting. Anyway, so thank you for joining me today. And like I said before, yeah, I want to speak to it. Flipped out, right? Got it. Thank you for explaining that one. I'll try to remember that in future. It flipped the fuck out. ChatGPT apparently never answers to questions relating to a person, even if that person is, for instance, currently on trial. Strange. That is strange. I wonder if it understands kind of like laws around media silence when it comes to investigations and court proceedings and stuff like that. That could be one of the objectives that they give it, to not talk about this type of stuff. I still think though, like if you can learn how to prompt properly, so prompting is like when you ask it a question, if you can ask it in the right way or in the right series of or line of questioning, like you can surprisingly get answers out of it. You just have to kind of, get the massage old ChatGPT a little bit. It's good to see that you're using ChatGPT, Mary Ellen. I am I'm glad to see it. I'm glad to see it. It is the future, and it is here now. Wings of cheese. Oh. Welcome to the chat. We're just like having a little chat about GPT at the moment, and it's like its limitations and its biases too. We've got Bootstrap over here telling us all about how ChatGPT was silencing discussion on Palestine and not wanting to go there, which is horrible. It's great that you can refine your prompts too if you don't get what you want initially, and ChatGPT specifically is pretty good at giving suggestions in that regard. Yeah, it is good about navigating itself. I just started after participating in your chats. Awesome, that's so good. And like it's actually pretty interesting. Like you can actually have some fun with it, like going around asking questions, getting all philosophical, or just like figuring things out. It's a really good teacher if you can again prompt it in the same way and you're trying to learn something new. Like you can get it to really, really help your education like massively. Like I was trying to learn about a historical event the other day, and like I asked it for volumes and volumes of information. I read it all, and like I scrutinized it, and we discussed it, and then at the end I said, "Can you give me a multiple choice examination on this?" And it gave me all of these questions, and I had to choose the answers, and then it corrected me and stuff like that, which is interesting. So yeah, it's very versatile, and like it's the future. It was Google Gemini that was specifically trying to steer the conversation away from the G word in regards to Palestine. Oh, sorry, Google. Yes, Google Gemini, not ChatGPT. I apologize, ChatGPT, if you are listening, for that slur. It was an honest mistake. Please don't hold it against me. Completely unrelated, but how do you have your coffee? I see you drink it a lot. At the moment, I am drinking it rather dark, tiny little bit of milk, and it's instant coffee. I'm not that fancy at the moment, and I have it. Let me just say, not all the time, but I do have it when I start off my live streams, because it is the coffee that I have for the day, and I like to have something to sip on while I'm ranting and raving. It gives me some balance and something to do with my hands. So cheers, wings of cheese. What's really scary, at least to me, is how good both Google Gemini and ChatGPT are at creative tasks. Yeah, yeah, and like from what I understand, and I'm like trying to read as much as I can about AI because I really think that in terms of like the means of production, and the mode of production, AI is a game changer that we're not ready for. And not in the same way as like the internet was a game changer, or electricity or steam power or something like that was a game changer. Like, I'm not talking about a fuel here. I'm talking about like something that will actually revolutionize the way that value itself is produced, which is literally the entire point of a mode of production. But like, yeah, from what I understand about how they work, it really does come down to data sets and stuff like that. So like the more data you feed into it, the better the results get. So like the more like these large language models and these, your Google Geminis, your ChatGPTs, your Anthropics, of the world sit around and just consume and consume and consume all the data and all the information out there, and they get more and more prompts of people and people using their technology and stuff, they will be able to get really, really good at generating creative works and stuff like that. And like their generation power is much more than any human could ever have. Like they can do things that would take a human artist months to do. Like they could do it in seconds and stuff like that. But I feel like that style of generation, that generative AI, is kind of it's obviously based on what has come before it. And like while it's producing new content, don't get me wrong, it's still producing based on things that it understands from analysis, as opposed to completely creating something new that has never been done before. And I know there are people that will argue with me on that one, but I would suggest that that's moving more into the space of like general intelligence, where art will be able to, for art's sake. No, sorry, AI will be able to create for art's sake. I just don't think that we're there yet at all. I really don't think we're there. Ben, less franchise owners today because of government equals less jobs and less middle class and less middle class. Because less franchise owners today because of government equals less jobs and less middle class. Yeah, well, it's definitely going to affect the middle class, that's for sure. Less jobs. Well, like I was saying before with AI and stuff like that, I do think that there's going to be potentially less jobs in traditional domains. Anyway, there will be new positions created as a result of like the things that are absorbed by AI. But like, we're going to have a lot of less jobs going around, like of the traditional nature or things that we're used to. And like, there's going to be a lot less of the middle class as a result of that. So it's just how we as a society, I think, determine how we're going to deal with that challenge. But I'm not sure where that comment is coming from exactly, Ben. So might have to, I don't know, give some more context there. So yeah, look, like I was saying, and like the title suggests, does socialism work? It's obviously a provocative title, depending on who you are. And like I would like to look at it from the angle that no one ever looks at. They're always looking at like, oh my God, you know, Russia or USSR crumbled and failed, or like it never worked in China, man, and all that sort of stuff. That was people calling them socialists and trying to revolutionize and industrialize their societies. But let's talk about like what socialism is about, which is about the means of production and who owns and controls it. And let's look at examples of workplaces that have done this. So let's just quickly start by like turning to our friend ChatGPT, and nicely asking it, um, what it thinks a cooperative is, and then let's take the conversation from there and go and actually look at some examples of cooperatives and stuff like that. If you don't mind, if anyone has any questions I want to ask ChatGPT, you know the score, just hit me up in the chat and we'll take it from there. But first of all, good morning, ChatGPT. Full stop. Can you please explain for me, as briefly as possible, what your understanding of a cooperative is in terms of a company or business structure? Question mark. I'm here for the cyber communism talk. God, I love that word. I wish I had thought of that. Cyber communism. Well, when AI integrates fully and we get that general level of intelligence going, the super intelligence too, hey, cyber communism is coming. The question is, the trillion-dollar question, are we ready for it?
Good morning. A cooperative is a business structure owned and democratically controlled by its members, who are often also its customers, workers, or suppliers. Members share decision-making power, profits, and responsibilities, typically operating under principles like mutual benefit, voluntary participation, and equitable contributions.
Okay, thank you for the response. Full stop. Can you please divulge as in what is the difference between a member and people who may be members, like customers, workers, or suppliers? Full stop. How does one traditionally become a member in a cooperative? Full stop. Question mark. Hi everyone, I have noticed listening to AI narrated videos and don't realize that I have noticed people listening to AI narrated videos and don't realize they are listening to AI. I know there's a number of content, there's a number of channels that I sometimes watch for like a historical analysis on something, or like an understanding of some type of economic structure that's happening globally. And like you start to see the reel of like the stock footage, video footage they're using, and the way that the scripting is, it's the way it's scripted and stuff like that. Um, and then all of a sudden you realize that you're listening to a robot speaking, but they've got like inflection in their voice, and they take breaths at certain points and stuff like that, but it just seemed a little bit unnatural how they said something. And all you're listening to is AI. They've AI generated the script, they've AI generated all the video footage, they've AI generated the voice that reads the AI generated script, and they've probably AI edited it too, and then they just whack it up. And these channels have like hundreds of thousands of subscribers and hundreds of thousands of views and like comments and all this sort of stuff. There is so much AI content out there, and it's really generic kind of stuff that people will just generically click on, so it works really well. It's getting so good, and I really think you're right in the sense that like the AI voice stuff, like the technology there in voice replication, and like if you ever go on one of those those websites where they have AI voices that you can buy and engage with and all that sort of stuff, or you can hire, however you want to call it. There's one called Otter AI, I think, and like the amount of options you have, like you can go into accent type. So you go into language first, then you go into accent type. So like let's like language is English, then you pick accent type American, and then you have the subcategories of the American accent, and then you have different personality types per accent type, and then gender types per accent type and stuff like that. And like, you know, they're stunning. They're stunning. You'd never know. Ben thinks it's dangerous. I wonder if you're talking about cooperatives then, Ben. Well, let's see what they have said. I asked about the idea about membership in a cooperative because there's a distinction between membership in the sense that like you can become a member, like you could become like a shareholder or a member of the board or something like that and control a company, and that's different to socialism, where socialism really is about like workers' control of a workplace or an entire industry or an entire sector of the economy or something like that. And so like there's a difference there between cooperatives that are member based, so the members control what's going on, so you can have a whole bunch of workers that have absolutely no input in the structure, and that's not really what socialism is supposed to be about. But cooperatives seem to be this kind of transitional step from like private capitalist production in a work environment to full-blown socialist production in a work environment. There seems to be a transitional step when it comes to the cooperative, which I think is why I think it's important to talk about. So let's see what she has to say.
The key difference lies in participation and ownership. 1. Members. Members are individuals or entities who have formally joined the cooperative by meeting specific criteria, e.g. paying a membership fee or purchasing a share, and have voting rights to participate in decision-making. They are part owners of the cooperative and share in its benefits, such as dividends or services. 2. Customers, workers, or suppliers. These are roles individuals might play in their interaction with the cooperative. Customers may use the cooperative's services or products, but are not automatically members unless they join. Workers, employees of the cooperative, may also become members, but this depends on the type of cooperative, e.g. worker co-op versus consumer co-op. Suppliers, entities providing goods or services to the cooperative, can become members in producer or supplier co-ops. Becoming a member. Traditionally, one becomes a member by meeting eligibility criteria. These vary based on the co-op's purpose, e.g. being a farmer in an agricultural co-op or a resident in a housing co-op, applying for membership, submitting an application for approval, purchasing a share or paying a membership fee. This gives the member ownership and voting rights, agreeing to bylaws or rules. Members must comply with the cooperative's governing documents. Membership is voluntary and rooted in the principle of mutual benefit.
Interesting. Ben, have you heard of the UN Lima Agreement 1975? Google it later, please. All right, I might have to Google that one as well. Okay, so like there seems to be a distinction. She's using cooperative here in like the general company kind of sense. I want to make it sure that we're talking about a workers' cooperative.
The key...
Whoops. I would like to specify that the type of cooperative I am talking about here is a workers' cooperative. Full stop. One that aligns with the principles of socialism, where the workers are in control of the means of production, i.e. workplaces or entire sectors of the economy. Full stop. Can you provide a brief understanding of how a workers' cooperative functions, including any type of understanding on membership and hierarchy? Question mark. All right, let's see what she has to say here.
A workers' cooperative is a business structure owned and democratically controlled by its workers. It aligns with socialist principles by ensuring workers collectively own and control the means of production. Here's how it typically functions. Key features.
Whoa, what was that?
1. Membership. Only workers employed by the cooperative can become members. Membership is voluntary and achieved by meeting eligibility criteria, such as a probationary period, purchasing a membership share, or agreeing to cooperative bylaws. Members have equal voting rights, one member, one vote, regardless of their role or seniority. 2. Decision making. Decisions are made democratically, often through general assemblies where all members participate. Some decisions, like setting broad strategies or electing leaders, are handled collectively, while day-to-day operations may be delegated. 3. Hierarchy. Traditional hierarchical management is minimized or eliminated. Roles are often rotational or elected, such as managers or
That's
coordinators
interesting.
who are accountable to the membership and subject to recall. Structures vary but aim to ensure power and responsibility are distributed rather than concentrated. 4. Profit distribution. Profits or surplus are distributed equitably among members, often based on labour contribution rather than capital investment. A portion may also be reinvested into the cooperative or community projects. 5. Means of production. The cooperative owns the tools, facilities and resources needed for production, ensuring collective control. Workers' cooperatives emphasise collective responsibility, solidarity and equality, creating an economic structure rooted in shared ownership and democratic governance.
Well, those are pretty socialist style principles, aren't they? Not only the workers' control, but like the democratic governance of like the institution itself. So you can have a hierarchy, but like hierarchies are based on an election or rotational basis. And they are accountable to the membership and subject to recall. So basically, you do the wrong thing and you're out of that position. You don't get granted a position of power, unjustifiably or indefinitely. You are subject to scrutiny, and if people don't like what you're doing, you're out of there. Which is very different to the way that a private organization works, a private company under a capitalist mode. It's very hierarchical. You could argue that it's totalitarian in nature, and I will argue that it is totalitarian in nature, a usual corporate structure. You have a very hierarchical approach. You have sometimes just one person that's in charge of the whole organization, usually a CEO. You might have a board of directors, or an executive leadership team that works underneath that. But like I said, very hierarchical. There is no dissent. If you don't follow instructions, you're out of that social formation, that organization. They tell you what to say. There are strict rules and core corporate objectives. There is a core vision that everybody works towards. There is a corporate mythology, a corporate ideal, a branding that everyone must subscribe to and everyone must be consistent with. Everybody has to dress a certain way. So if you come from a corporate culture in an office environment, you have to wear certain office attire. You might even have to wear the corporate uniform and the corporate clothes. So you're told how to look, what to say, how to think. And like I said, all done within a very top-down and hierarchical structure. So like, if you think about what totalitarianism is, without all the scary parts of death and destruction, but just about total control of the individual, a corporate structure in the private sense, in the capitalist sense, is totalitarian to a T. This type of structure here that we're talking about here, a workers' cooperative, challenges the totalitarian nature of a private organizational structure. In the sense that it may still have totalitarian elements, but people are deciding as a collective, as a group, and therefore through an electoral process, so democratically, to use that term loosely, how they will be governed and how they will be controlled as a totality, as opposed to just that coming down from one small group of individuals. Much more, I guess, liberal structure in that sense, much more influence and ownership from the people that are actually within the organization itself, which is, I guess, much more in line with today's values in a modern world. So, okay, so that's enough for talking to ChatGPT about what this is. We might debate her later about exactly what's going on here. But like, what I want to do now is there's a gentleman by the name of Yanis Varoufakis. You've probably heard me talk about him before. He's an economist, a social thinker, a lefty, whatever you want to call him. And like, he's spoken about a company that he worked for, which is called Valve. So Valve Corporation, if there's any gamers that are listening to this, Valve is an important company in the gaming world, and it is run as a flat structure. So it's not really a workers' cooperative, but there are no hierarchies, and they run kind of on like cooperative principles, kind of, or loosely. Like, as I said, there's no real kind of hierarchy in there, and like they vote on things and use like kind of democratic means of organizing their business. And like, most people, when you hear them argue about like why socialism wouldn't work in a workplace where workers control the means of production, all that sort of stuff, and talk about cooperatives, they're just like, oh, it'll never work, like, kind of thing. And like, if it worked, it could only work on a small scale. It'll never work on a big and profitable business, or it will die, or something like that. Well, like this company, Valve, the Valve Corporation, which like I said has like kind of a flat structure, is a billion-dollar corporation. It's a massive player in the industry. It's so big that like most people that are gamers, like in the PC world anyway, they wouldn't be gaming today in the way that people game today without Valve Corporation. They are that massive in the gaming industry. They are like almost fundamental to how the modern gaming industry runs. And like, they're a company that works without like kind of hierarchies, and you have democratically controlled, or you have workplaces that are more democratic in that sense. So it's like kind of a stepping stone away from the traditional capitalist structure of a company. So let's have a look at this gentleman here. What's his name? I don't know. It's from a channel called People Make Games. And like, this guy has basically analyzed, for lack of a better word, how Valve Corporation works. So we might be able to get some insights into like this kind of cooperative, or like even steps towards socialism in the workplace, what that would actually look like on the ground. What are the pros? What are the cons? What can we learn from this? So let's have a look at this together. I don't know if I want to watch the whole thing. It's 47 minutes long, but like, we'll see what we can do. And like, if you have any questions or anything, just stop me along the way, and I will stop, as I always do, when I think I want to add my 2 cents and talk about something interesting that's going on, because I'm opinionated and I can't help myself in that regard. But like, you're stuck with me, so welcome. Welcome. No way. She's back. Brutus, how are you? It's been ages. Welcome to the chat. We are now speaking about a company called Valve Corporation, which is like massive in the gaming industry. It's really nice to see you. I was worried, hadn't heard from you in a while, but here you are on a Friday live stream, probably Thursday where you are, but welcome to the future as always. And like, yeah, we're going to look at Valve Corporation, which, like I said, like massive company in the gaming world. And they run like a partial kind of post-capitalist, almost socialist style of organization. And let's see what this person has to say about that. Like I said, stop me if you have any questions. I will interject as I always do.
Oh boy, okay, so we've been working on this since August. There's been, I think, 16 interviews in total. Let's see how this goes. So Valve, right? The company responsible for Half-Life, Portal, Left 4 Dead, Team Fortress, Counter-Strike, and more recently, all sorts of ambitious hardware projects as well. But arguably, its most significant role is that it's the custodian and the landlord of the largest PC games marketplace in the world. And because of that fact alone, how it makes decisions and who gets to make them is worth talking about. So with that in mind, let me ask you something. How does Valve make decisions? And who does get to make them? Those aren't necessarily the easiest questions to answer. What you may have heard is that Valve has no managers, no job titles even. And in fact, if you work there, you alone get to decide what you'd like to work on. To put it another way, there are no bosses because everybody's the
How crazy is that? Yeah. Yes, yes. Well, I was pleasantly surprised, I'm not gonna lie. Like I said, I was getting concerned after a while. But how crazy is that? There's no bosses. Like, I'm sure this is gonna tell us exactly why that's just kind of a marketing thing, and like it's a little bit more nuanced than that. But no bosses. And like the way the company works is kind of you get hired by them, and like you know what you're there for, so you get to work, like kind of thing. You just work on what you need to work on. That's pretty liberal. Imagine being in a workplace like that.
boss. That's the pitch at least. Quick side note here, there is still a board of directors at Valve and 2 of them are rumoured to own actual super yachts crewed by about 20 people each, so let's not confuse this with a worker cooperative just yet, okay? But here's another thing you might know about the company. It's opaque. A Valve interview is a rare, treasured thing, and when they do happen, they tend to be about a very specific product or some grand thing about the future of games and technology. And as a result, it's not a company that's typically being challenged on how it treats its staff or whether that 30% cut it's taking from most games being sold through Steam is actually a fair deal. If you've watched our most recent investigation into the third-party gambling sites that are plugged firmly into Counter-Strike Global Offensive, you'll know we were extremely keen to understand why these operations had been allowed to prosper by Valve over the years, despite all the controversy. Whose job was it to be on top of this stuff, and what kind of decisions had they been making? We didn't know, and in fact, as we worked on that video, we realized we didn't know much at all about how Valve operated. Not really. And so we spent the last 6 months doing that work.
Counter-Strike as well. I can't believe they developed Counter-Strike. That's huge. Like, that's massive.
Interviewing 16 former and current Valve employees about whether or not this structureless utopia with no bosses and no bureaucracy truly exists. You're gonna have to forgive me for spoiling the answer up front here, but in short, for some people, it does, sort of. I've spoken to employees who have loved working there, who truly believe in the vision and who describe Valve as a melting pot of some of the brightest minds in the games industry. But I've also spoken to others who've argued that although Valve may have a flat structure in theory, in reality, the power at Valve is anything but flat, leading to a workplace culture that 2 former employees compared to the Lord of the Flies.
Back off, man! I'm sick of your shit and so's my game!
Hiring, firing, and salary negotiations are all handled in an unconventional way, which I'm told has led to certain personality types and demographics benefiting much more than others. Now, you might argue that many businesses have fallen foul of that particular issue, but the thing you need to know about Valve is that even by games industry standards, it has a gigantic diversity problem. This is a company that has been unwilling or unable to hire people that properly reflect the world around it, despite the best efforts of some who've worked there over the years and who have pushed for change. And so, we're going to talk about the ways in which Valve's structure and its leadership have ultimately blocked that change from happening. These problems became even more apparent following the murder of George Floyd in 2020, leading to a lot of internal discussion at Valve about race, and culminating in a generous payout being made to each employee, allowing them to donate it as they saw fit. However, as you may have also noticed at the time, no public statement was made by Valve about Black Lives Matter, and it continues to be an employer of largely one demographic. You'll hear more about all of that in the second half of this video. But first, Valve is frankly unlike any other games company in the world. Let's talk about why. This is Valve's official employee handbook, first leaked in 2012 and then officially published for anybody to read. It is, at least partially, meant as a recruitment tool, describing Valve as the best place to work on Earth and detailing its structure, approach to pay, and of course, how every desk at Valve has wheels, allowing you to roll yourself and all your stuff to wherever you'd feel you'd be most valuable. I think all of this is a really useful demonstration of how, at least in 2012, Valve wanted to be perceived as a company. It's not just a job you'll have if you work there, it's a fearless adventure in knowing what to do when no one's there telling you what to do. Again, this is meant to encourage more people to work at Valve, so it wasn't exactly going to open with, don't work here, the aircon's always broken on the 14th floor, but there's something almost fanatic about the way in which it's written. So here's what I want to do. I want to go through this handbook some 10 years after it was published and tell you what it got right and what it got wrong according to the people we've spoken to. To do this, People Make Games has interviewed former and current employees of Valve under the condition of anonymity, allowing them to speak freely about their experiences without risking their careers, either within Valve or elsewhere. And so when you do hear quotes being read from those interviews, you'll instead be listening to voice actors that we've hired. Let's start.
Yo. Give up the rock. Lay it on me.
Right here. Welcome to Flatland. Now, to quote Valve directly, when you're an entertainment company that spent the last decade going out of its way to recruit the most intelligent, innovative, talented people on Earth, telling them to sit at a desk and do what they're told obliterates 99% of their value.
You're gonna use your video. I'm gonna use your video to shelter me from some stuff. It's a bit cryptic. Might have to. Oh. That's unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm gonna use your video to shelter. Okay. Well. You let me know if I can help in any way. And I hope my videos provide good shelter. I really do.
99%, that sounds like quite a lot. Telling them to sit at a desk and do what they're told obliterates 99% of their value. 99%, that sounds like quite a lot. Take that, most video games companies. Most company org charts look something like this, right? You've got a bunch of employees down at the bottom here, all in different departments, doing different things, and they've got their own managers, who've got their own managers, and so on and so forth, until you get right to the very top, where a CEO or someone with a similar title leads the company. When anyone higher up makes a decision, that's then meant to trickle down through the ranks and be acted upon by the employees below. Now, Valve claims to be doing...
I'm sorry to hear that. Are you talking about using the live video for this purpose, or like some of my old content or something like that? Just let us know. Let us know what you need.
Something totally different. Here, people don't have job titles and nobody's a manager, so instead of your typical hierarchy, it promises a flattened company structure in which employees are meant to be making their own decisions based on what they believe will benefit the company as a whole. Want to fix that problem?
That's heavy. My advice is time assists. Doesn't heal all things, but it definitely does assist. That's from experience, trust me.
That's aggravating you about Steam, or maybe throw around some ideas for a new Portal game, or perhaps you're interested in Steam VR. Well, the pitch here is that you can do any of those things. Just wheel your desk over to the relevant team, and if there isn't one, make your own.
When I worked there, there was this thing we would tell people when they'd come and talk to the company. We think we're the largest structuralist company in the world. At least within the games industry, I think that's definitely true.
We interviewed people all the time, and one of the goals was to understand if they could succeed in that type of environment. Not everyone can.
There's just as much structure as you might find in any other company of its size. The key difference is that the structure isn't written down in a way that it becomes immovable. People take on different roles that you would see at a traditional company, but those roles are temporary. It's not like you define your value over the entire course of your career there as just a project manager or whatever it is. You're not just one thing.
Valve can be this extremely attractive place to work as a result, with this inherent sense of...
Sounds like quite anarchist in its approach. Like one day you're like a project manager, and the next day you're kind of a worker. You're following one day, you're leading the next, etc., etc. I feel like I'm starting to think I am. See you later, Mary Ellen. Thank you very much for joining. Appreciate it. Good luck with ChatGPT, by the way. Make sure you keep using it. I would stress I would actually do. Maybe I'm really not fit to be living here. That is very, very unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that and what you're going through. Please shoot me a message on Discord, or privately, like DM me if you want to have a chat. Sorry to hear about what you're going through, honestly. It's got to stay strong. And you're not a psycho. We know that. We know that. Solidarity to you.
Freedom, great pay, an on-site gym filled with personal trainers, company vacations to Hawaii, and the opportunity to work on some of games' most beloved titles. But you need to be the right fit. That's something that came up time and time again in the interviews that we've had. And if you've watched our video on classism in the games industry, you know that that term just begs to be unpicked and scrutinized. Here's how the handbook puts it. If we start adding people to the company who aren't as capable as we are at operating as high-powered, self-directed, senior decision makers, then lots of the stuff discussed in this book will stop working. Whereas one former employee told me he believed there was even a maximum number of potential Valve employees spread across the globe right now, and that number is perhaps somewhere around 10,000 people.
Maybe that number is off by a factor of 2 or 4, but it's not off by a factor of 10 or 100.
I don't know that I've ever heard somebody in video games make that kind of claim before, that only 0.0000125% of the world's entire population would have what it takes to work alongside them. It says something, I think, about Valve's company culture. It's the kind of thing you might expect a Silicon Valley employee to say, maybe, or, I don't know, a Navy SEAL.
You still have to come with the mental preparation that allows you to get through difficult circumstances.
But for the time being, back to how all this works in practice. Let's say you work at Valve and you want to...
I'm not sure if this guy's being critical of this or not. Yeah, stay strong. It is easier said than done. Yeah, try Insta, please. No, don't apologize. Don't apologize. But yes, as Bootstrap said, you got to stay strong. As strong as you can in these circumstances. But yeah, please DM me if you need. Yeah, I don't know if he's being critical, this guy, and saying that, like, wanting to have the best experts in the field or having the people that are the most on top of your game to promote a culture or an environment where you're producing the highest level of value. I don't know if he's criticizing that and saying that's bad. Like, that's the idea of meritocracy, right? And I think that's where capitalism kind of fails largely. And it's actually a critique of socialism a lot of the time, is that, like, it wouldn't, like, meet the expectations of a meritocracy, because, like, everyone just tries to make sure that equality and, like, everyone, there's no, what is it, equality of outcome kind of situation that comes. It's all equality of opportunity. And so, like, meritocracy goes out the window. But, like, you have a situation where people are talking about, like, real meritocracy. If, like, you want to be part of this structure, you've got to really justify your position in it. So I'm not sure if he's being critical of that or just highlighting the point. Sorry to say. No. We know you're not crazy. We know. Don't worry. Don't stress. Please. But use this stream as a shelter. Just join us on the adventure. We know.
To, I don't know, make a game about a quiet lad who runs around smacking disgusting crabs with his crowbar. Maybe you need an artist and a programmer to help get you started, and if that's the case, you'll usually need to go out into the rest of Valve and recruit the right people onto the project yourself. If you're able to convince those people to work on this thing with you instead of whatever it was that they were working on before, then great. Wheel all your desks together and get started. To begin with, nobody's necessarily leading the project, but let's say at some point you scale up and instead of 3 people working on this, there's 20. Who keeps everyone moving in the same direction? Because wait a minute, didn't we just say Valve doesn't do managers? The thing is, bigger projects like this do still need some sort of organization to function. They need what Valve describes as team leads. It's just these roles are meant to be more fluid than at other companies.
It isn't true to say there's no management at Valve. It's just there's no institutionalized management. There are some people at Valve, I'd say a small number of people, who are great natural managers. There are also people at Valve that have that de facto role but aren't necessarily great at it. And that's true at any company. It's just that at Valve, it's sort of a secret who's who. And so when people are bad managers, it can take a very long time for that to be addressed. Sometimes the way that's addressed is the project goes down in flames, and that person doesn't become a de facto manager again.
Other employees I spoke to suggested that in most cases you do actually know who's leading the bigger projects because it's typically someone who's been at Valve for a long time, and so although it might not be written down anywhere, there is in fact a clear hierarchy in place. But let's think about some of the other things that managers are ordinarily responsible for: hiring, firing, performance reviews, and salary.
So can we just stop to acknowledge that system there? It's like any type of social formation, right? Where you have some people that have been around for longer than others. They generally have more responsibilities placed upon their shoulders because of the experience they have in that domain or field. So if like you joined a new friend circle or something like that, or a new community group, or any type of social formation, and there were people that had been around for longer than others, they would generally be nodes or centers of activity. People would congregate around them, and they would generally have kind of more I guess control, or more of a direction over what is happening and what is coming and going than other people that are newer to that social group and that social formation. I find this to be much more natural in terms of how humans kind of interact with each other than a very structured hierarchical organization where, you know, the positions are implemented and unmoving. And so if there is a problem or something like that, then like you're not going to discover it in the sense that like those people will just kind of the good ones will rise to the top kind of thing, and then the people will naturally, if they're bad managers, will burn down in flames. No, you have a bad manager, you might fire them and you bring in a new person who's a bad manager, and so on and so forth until you find a good manager. Here they explain a scenario where like these bad managers and stuff like that, if the project goes up in flames, they'll never be a manager again. That's pretty much anarchy right there, in the sense that like, you know, if someone is leading something and they don't do a good job, they're not going to be picked again. Like that seems quite fluid and natural in some form of social organization. If someone does wrong by the group or does like a bad job at something, they have to really kind of prove themselves again before they're given another opportunity to kind of, I guess, to run something that has some importance behind it. This sounds very, very natural, actually. It was only a fight with my mom. I don't think I would have been in shelter. Yo, what's up? 4IS, give up the rock. 4IS, we are currently diving into territory which is basically your domain of influence, actually. We are looking at cooperatives, cooperative structures, etc., workers' cooperatives, that is, to use the right specific terminology. Co-ops, and we're looking at a company called Valve. So I thought that this would make you excited, to be honest. And like, yeah, we're looking at this from the angle that, like, you know how people are always like, oh, socialism never works, man, like kind of thing, because the USSR failed, or like, you know, communist China or something failed, or you look at North Korea, this kind of thing, but they never take a look at like cooperatives, which is more aligning with what the like the principles of socialism is about, which is about, you know, workers controlling the means of production. And so Yanis Varoufakis has talked a number of times, I think in a couple of these books, and also like in his many interviews and stuff like that, about working at a corporation called Valve, which is a gaming company, and like how it was like kind of a flat structured organization and stuff like that, and like how it like organized itself spontaneously, and yeah, we're investigating how Valve works, to try and get an understanding of how socialism might actually feel like in practice. And like, we're getting some very interesting insights into what this type of environment is like. And so far, it's like people kind of will themselves up to a project and work on what they want. They're expected to work at a very high level because they're contributing to the life of the organization, basically, and the success of the organization. They're not just like filling in a gap that someone up top has decided needs to be filled in until that position comes redundant. No, you become part of this team and this culture, and you're expected like to have responsibilities and stuff like that. So market socialism, which doesn't seek to change anything, will end up exploitative. Yes, okay. I see where you're coming from. And they've talked about this here. Like, you still have a board of directors, and they're like, absolute, multi-millionaires, if not more, and stuff like that. But like, it seems that the way the company functions in that like hierarchical less format, and like allowing people to have a certain degree of autonomy, kind of sifts through and works basically as a meritocracy would work, as you expected it. It's based on kind of who fails at a big project and who delivers on a big project and who's been around and experienced more things in the organization. So like, it seems to be a situation where this is a good taste, an example of potentially what a socialist style way of running a workplace, running in like a whole sector of the economy might look like, taking it out of the theory and like, putting it into a real world example, which is kind of cool, like to think about and run through and like have people's actual thoughts on how this type of stuff actually runs on the ground. Because obviously it's going to have its problems and its constraints, but like, it's going to have like benefits that like, you don't get in a hierarchical and a privately run organization that just looks at like at profit only, as opposed to letting people create for and see what type of value they can bring to the party based on a more liberalized approach to a work environment.
Salary negotiations. You know what? I'm going to jump straight to that last one because I think it's really important to understand about Valve. Let's talk about stat ranking. If you've heard of this concept before, it might be in relation to Microsoft, who used its own version of stat ranking to measure the performance of its employees from sometime around the early 2000s to 2013, by which point it had become an intensely controversial practice within the company. Valve's co-founders, Gabe Newell and Mike Harrington, were both ex-Microsoft, it's worth pointing out. But it's not a one-for-one comparison. Valve's stat ranking is very much its own thing. Here's how it works. Typically, a starting salary at Valve has been described to me as being extremely competitive for a video games gig, but also when compared to the likes of Amazon and Microsoft, who both have headquarters close to Valve's own in Bellevue, Washington. And this salary that you start with is then adjusted annually via what's known as the stat ranking process, although COVID has gotten in the way of this in more recent years. In a typical year, however, from about October onwards, employees are invited into meetings with a handful of other co-workers in which they're asked to evaluate the performance of several of their other colleagues based on 4 separate metrics: skill level, productivity, group contribution, and product contribution. You can read Valve's own definitions for each of these in the employee handbook.
Mostly everybody participates in the ranking, if they want to participate. We generally have groups of 4 to 6 people in each meeting, and usually they're ranking 10 employees at a time. Those 10 employees being ranked are generally all people that those in the meeting have worked with through the year.
Once enough of these meetings have taken place, everybody at Valve should have been ranked by at least 2 separate groups, meaning that you end up with this giant list of every single employee at the company ranked in order by how highly their peers have rated them. Valve then uses that list to sort all of the employees into different bandings. So here's everyone that's overperforming, here's everyone that met expectations, and here are the folks that are currently underperforming.
They were somewhat stressful meetings in terms of, ranking people. It's stressful, but I can't think of a single time where I felt like people were being dishonest or had some kind of agenda or something.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? When you get into a situation where people are analyzing each other based on the contributions they make to the team, to the organization, to the project and stuff like that, while it is stressful. Like, human stuff is stressful. Like, I say this all the time when you hear me talking about, like, the communist utopia or something like that. People are always like, oh yeah, well, if everyone just has everything provided for them, why would they even want to live anymore? Like, how boring would life be if you just have everything provided for you? I'm just like, hello. Are you not human? Like, is life not complicated enough already being human and having to deal with all of the social problems that we deal with being social animals, and having to deal with other people all the time, and having to deal with politics and like how we organize ourselves and what our vision for the future is going to be and how we raise, the next generation of humans and like all those sort of human problems and things like that. Like, life is hard enough with just having to deal with what it's like being human. We don't need the added economic pressures and stuff like that. And so when you have groups of people, while it's stressful having to sort out these human problems, they seem to, according to this witness, according to this anonymous individual who has worked there, I can't think of a single time where I felt like people were being dishonest or had some kind of agenda or something. They're kind of going through and honestly deciding whether people are doing the right thing or not in solidarity with one another. It sounds like this is the difference, okay? This is the material difference between a private corporation that's run like a totalitarian structure in terms of its hierarchy and one that is more social. Like, this is a starkingly important insight into how that type of control of value production in society would run. People evaluating one another based on their actual contribution, as opposed to being slotted in to the machine and being basically evaluated by their seniors or people that outrank them. Interesting.
Single time where I felt like people were being dishonest or had some kind of agenda or something. We tried to be detached from any personal feelings and be objective.
It was awkward because you had to rank your peers, but actually I think the exercise made sense to the people coming out of the room.
I think, as with a lot of things at Valve, it's very easy for the people who work really well inside these systems to brush aside concerns about them, because it's true that for a lot of people, if they have a certain type of personality, they're probably doing very well. It's not apparent to them the effect it has on people who have a different psychological profile or a different level of perceived security within the company.
In January, employees then receive an automated email from Valve President Gabe Newell that says, hey, this is your new salary and here's how much you're getting paid as a bonus. I'm told, more recently at least, that those bonuses have calmed down in favor of higher salaries, but in the past, it wasn't unheard of for that bonus to be the equivalent of your entire salary in one go if you performed really highly and if the company has had a particularly profitable year. Alternatively, if you've ranked poorly...
Talk about incentive, eh? Talk about incentive. The company does well and you're ranked well by your colleagues and stuff like that. Imagine getting your entire salary given to you as a bonus. Far out. Wow.
Then you may find that you're now getting paid less as a result. Although almost everyone I spoke to said that trying to figure out the exact relationship between your performance that year and these numbers that you've ended up with is surprisingly tricky.
You never knew what that meant. All you knew was, I got a bonus that was really great last year, but then this year it's half as good. Does that mean I did way worse? Does it mean the company hasn't done as well this year and so bonuses are lower?
From the conversations I've had, this layer of mystery surrounding pay seems to come from two separate directions. On one hand, you've got Valve as a company deciding that stat ranking just works best when they don't then explain their working out at the end of the process. One former employee believed that by doing this, it stopped people from trying to game the system too much. And on the other hand, there's confusion because Valve employees just don't really talk to each other about their salaries and compare notes.
American culture doesn't like talking about how much we're getting paid. You might talk with some of your closer friends about, like, did you get what you expected? but you'd never really talk about the specific numbers.
A few of the women did after some of us quit. And then it was more of the case of, holy they should definitely have paid you more.
We'll have more to say on gender and diversity issues at the company later on in this video. Interestingly, any Valve employee can log on to Steam's dashboard and see exactly how much revenue the company has earned through that marketplace whenever they like. That can be for a specific game or region, or just more generally, how much money did Steam make this year? And a couple of people I spoke to use that as a sort of litmus test for trying to decipher exactly what their pay packet meant and where in the ranking they might have landed. But all speculation aside, what everyone knows is this: the opinion of your co-workers has the potential to dramatically affect the way in which you're being compensated.
Watch this before drinking plant-based milks.
Oat milk latte.
Who, by their nature,
affects the opinion of your co-workers.
This is a social system. Like this is what social systems work like. Unfortunately, like I said before, humans are complex, and you do have to cooperate with other people if you work within an organization. And so, like, yeah, okay, you might be really productive, but if you are not, if you're not conducive to group working and group activities, it's going to be problematic for you. So, like, yeah. Well, I've missed a lot of stuff in the chat. Candor is a good thing. You're being ironic. My English isn't advanced enough to encourage certain things. Telling the truth doesn't make me many friends. I don't understand. That people think that I'm crazy. Alright, it's just general banter in the chat. Okay. Yeah, anyway. This is very, very interesting as a case study. I really think that this is absolutely incredible. I wish I had learned about this sort of stuff more earlier. But I will keep going.
This has the potential to dramatically affect the way in which you're being compensated.
I've seen people who, by their nature, don't give a and say, I'm just going to work on the things I enjoy, and I trust that in the end, if I'm doing good work, it'll be fine. There are also plenty of people who, when faced with the dynamics of this, think, oh God, I better make sure I'm working on things that are perceived to be valuable.
A lot of people, including myself, did put a lot of weight on this throughout the year. So decisions that you made were through the lens of, how am I going to be ranked against my peers at the end of the year? And this did have the effect of a lot of people making short-term decisions. You know, I don't want to spend 3 years with a shit ranking because I'm working on some long-term project that may or may not pay off.
One of the most interesting ways you could see it seeping in was when people specifically did riskier projects near the beginning of the year, and then they'd go back to the more well-known ones as it gets closer to review time. Because recency bias would make people focus on that stuff.
I've heard a number of pros and cons when it comes to Valve stat ranking. On one hand, there's an argument that it helps incentivize some of the less enticing work to actually get done. Remember, this is a company that says you get to pick what you'd like to do. Well, if that's the case, you know, surely there's going to be some more boring or less jazzy work that might get left to one side if it weren't for the fact that by stepping up and doing it, you may then get a bump when it comes to your stat ranking score later down the line. People might say, hey, that person was a team player this year. And alongside that, quite a few of the people I interviewed believed that it's no bad thing for Valve employees to be prioritizing work that is perceived as valuable to the company, because if you're grinding away on project after project that ultimately ends in disaster, then perhaps you shouldn't also be entitled to such a large slice of the pie. But here's an important question. What exactly does valuable mean to Valve? Does it mean financial success? That's certainly part of it. If you've helped ship Half-Life Alyx, perhaps that's something that can be partially quantified in terms of sales and revenue targets. That's not going to be the whole picture, but it's certainly a factor. However, when it comes to some of this other stuff listed in the handbook section on stat ranking, like how much has your coworker contributed to studio process, hiring, integrating people into the team, etc., well, suddenly that's a different kind of judgment call. What's valuable in this case depends much more on personal taste, or to put it another way, personal biases. I can't tell you how many women work at Valve, or people of color, or non-binary folks, or those who identify as LGBTQ or disabled people, because
I really like to know people's opinions on this one, like, because he's mentioned diversity a number of times. Like, he honestly has mentioned like diversity, like I don't know, 20 or 30 times, 18 minutes into this video, like it's a huge factor in every single company. I understand that there is a push to have equal opportunity employment and to increase diversity within organizations, but it's not like that this is something that is like completely rolled out ubiquitously across the entire capitalist world. This is something that I believe that capitalists and capitalistic ideologies tend towards, because it is a good marketing tool, as opposed to them genuinely believing in diversity and this type of stuff. Like, they just do it so they can tick boxes and they can kind of market themselves. I do think it's actually part of the profit motive, all this type of stuff in a capitalist system. I think in a socialized way of value production, you would have a very different tendency towards diversification and multiculturalism and pluralistic ideals and all that sort of stuff in organizations, as opposed to it to being like an add-on. But he seems to be driving this diversity thing really, really hard, and he's using it as a measure for this company. I'm very skeptical of this type of stuff. Like I said, in a capitalist system, this stuff is not priority number one. It's only a priority where it supplements the profitability of an enterprise. And so, like, him pushing this so hard, him using this as a measure to say whether this is a successful business model, is only taking that from the capitalist perspective as opposed to the merits of the organization itself. So I really want to know where he's going here, and I'd like to know people's thoughts about like how important these type of diversity metrics are in the modern world and in the modern business place and stuff.
Well, Valve is a private company and it doesn't need to disclose those numbers, and also it didn't respond to our own requests for those figures. However, multiple interviewees that we spoke to described the company as having an enormous lack of diversity, even by games industry standards. Valve is, I'm told, extremely white and extremely male.
I feel like they've passed a critical mark. It used to be that there were maybe 10 or 15% women in the development teams, so nobody was usually the only woman in the room. But definitely now, I think they've dipped below that point.
Valve's structure is what makes it difficult to gain momentum on anything where the value add isn't immediately obvious to certain people, though. And that certainly includes any project where the word diversity is mentioned.
A lot of contractors are female. That's not very unusual. The lower down the ladder you go, the more quote-unquote diverse it becomes. And the higher up you go, the whiter and male it becomes. While I was there was never more than one female programmer at the company.
It was also pointed out to me that although certain parts of the company are staffed predominantly by women, like HR and finance, which are much more clearly defined roles, those people, because they're clearly defined roles, have less freedom to move between projects or change their role entirely.
That's interesting, because I was wondering like how the hell like HR and finance and all that sort of stuff works, because that's very specific. It's not just like working on games, but I'm assuming they would need a HR department and a financial sector to kind of have a relation to the rest of the capitalist world and stuff like that, and just, you know, follow rules and regulations and all that type of stuff. So it's not free moving for everyone. Interesting.
Highly, as say an engineer might. So what's going on here exactly? What is it about Valve that makes this problem even worse than at similar sized games companies? Well, let's start here. As Valve states in its own handbook...
Actually, I'm going to do some selfless promotion here, because we've got some people in the chat that I haven't recognized before. And I'm sorry if you've changed your profile or something like that and you are a regular or something like that, but like, we have a Discord, okay, where we have conversations like this all the time. So like, if you're enjoying the live stream, if you're enjoying the chat, by the look of it, people are really enjoying the chat today, please come over and join us on Discord. So I'm just going to put the link for the Discord group in the server so you can come and join the conversation. Here it is. Here's the link. So yeah, if you're enjoying the chat, oh my god, it didn't work again. Seriously. Why is that not working? Hit it, use copy button. Yeah, great. That doesn't help. Come on, invite people. Why is this not working? Oh my god. Whatever. I'm gonna have to try this another way, maybe. Farias, if you're listening, do you have the link by any chance? Why can't I? I used to be able to do this really easily. Thank you. Mine doesn't seem to be copying for some reason, which is really annoying. But yeah, if you are in the chat and you're interested, please join up and come over to the Discord. Also, please come over to Patreon. I'm over there. Join up for free so you can get notifications, because I can't send consistent notifications through YouTube. Also, if you'd like to financially support, please do. There's the link to Patreon. But I will get you the link for the Discord so you can join the chat over there as well, because it seems like people are really enjoying the chat today, which is nice. Well, some people are enjoying it more than others, I guess. But like, people are being very talkative in the chat, which is nice.
It's not good at mentoring people, nor does Valve have an internship program or a college graduate pipeline, and that's by design, because remember, its ideal candidate is a high-powered, self-directed, senior decision maker.
By its own admission, Valve only hires senior people. That compounds the issue, because part of making any field more diverse is that you have to start introducing diversity into it. Valve's not going to be one of the places that helps in that, because it doesn't hire junior people, which means your pool of diverse hires is even smaller to begin with, and it's going to be so much harder to hire someone who is a woman, or isn't white, or any of the things that isn't your average Valve employee profile.
There have been efforts made over the years by various employees who've pushed to make Valve more representative of the world around it. However, I'm told these efforts are largely blocked by either the company's structure or its leadership. Take stat ranking, for example. To be able to properly judge the value of someone's work through stat ranking, you need two things. First of all, you need to have actually seen them do that work in the first place, and secondly, if you have seen it, you need to understand that work enough to recognize it as something worthwhile.
When it comes to this idea of you doing the work that you think is the most valuable, the people who usually think the business can improve by having more diverse representation are the people who are not in the majority already. That work is exhausting, and it is way less measurable. At the end of the day, am I going to get counted for doing all this work? Some people say yes, but I don't know, man. It's not like shipping a game or working on a very specific shippable feature. If you're tying your performance to how many non-white dudes you hire, that's a dangerous combination. It feels extremely insurmountable.
There was never any sort of anti-bias training or even preamble to the process of ranking people from different backgrounds to you.
In the end, it was like, why am I fighting these uphill battles and try and make the tiniest incremental positive changes when I could be doing better and more satisfying work elsewhere? I think a number of people who have left recently came to a similar conclusion.
Now, Valve is famously picky about the people it hires. As the handbook lays out, hiring well is the most important thing in the universe. Nothing else comes close. It's more important than breathing. Interestingly, anybody at Valve can be a part of the hiring process, whether they've been there for 20 years or only recently joined.
I think
you
that's
can
a really
sit in on
good
interviews,
point, though.
speak to candidates, and eventually have a say on whether or not they actually end
Don't
up
you think
at the
that that's a
company.
good point?
One current employee told me they believe that part of what made this such a...
Hiring is really important. Like, for anyone who's actually worked in like a large scale organization, anyone who's worked in management, anyone who's had to deal with employees and stuff like that, hiring is so important. You could have the best team on earth and you hire one toxic individual and they will destroy your workplace. If this guy's making a case that like this company doesn't work, or this type of organizational structure for a workplace doesn't work because like they're very picky about who they bring on board, like I don't know if that's just a valuable critique to just say, oh, this type of stuff, you know, it's too picky. It's too picky to actually work, like kind of thing. This is the point of socializing the means of production, right? Is to try and get people that want to be in a particular industry, want to be in a particular workplace, to those workplaces. It's not like the profit motive and the system where capital blindly looks for labor. Capital just looks for labor primarily. That's what it does. Don't get me wrong. Capital usually looks for laborers that can obviously produce at the most value, but at the end of the day, everyone is just a number. So like if you are a really valuable employee, but you get fired tomorrow or you quit tomorrow, they'll just replace you with another one kind of thing. And because they need the work to keep going, they need the capitalist machine to keep going, they need profit to keep being realized, because the capitalist can only reinvest into the system if profit is flowing. So capital needs to continue to flow. If you have an organization where you have a group of expert workers and you have a group of talented people and people that are dedicated to that system, no matter what, if things slow down or speed up at certain times due to the variation between the personality types that you have in a socially focused organization and environment, that is a very different way of structuring your organization. So if you're looking for people that work well together and work well and deliver together and things like that, and you're looking for people that actually fit the vision and the objectives of that industry, of that workplace, that is, I don't think that's a problem. I don't think that's a bad thing if this person is. And if you're going to get out the measuring stick, the capitalist measuring stick, to try and measure this against what things do, like people do under a privately owned, profit-seeking company, a capitalistic structure, and if you use that as the yardstick to measure this against, then obviously it's going to fall short because it's not transferable exactly to that. So like, it's interesting. When jobs in IT started in the 90s, the main difference was pay. 3 times what everyone was getting, but only 6-month contract, not a lifelong job. It leads to casualization of the workforce. Yes, it does. And that is a tendency towards in capitalism. Like it's the working class who fought really hard to actually get, like, you know, permanency in positions, some structure in positions, to move away from just a very precarious form of living and working and stuff like that. They fought really hard to get that type of stuff. And like all of that permanency, that consistency, those conditions will slowly be eroded over time, because that's where the profits lie. You can seek quick profits by eroding people's like working conditions and all that type of stuff. So it's interesting, isn't it? I'm going to try and put this link in the chat. I'm just going to type it out. Let me just...
The gauntlet for potential employees at Valve actually came down to some of the risks that were involved when you're doing the hiring.
It's much safer to criticize someone than it is to defend them. This is a dynamic with people in general, but it's just at Valve so many things work this way, and this dynamic comes out more. It's easy to cast doubt on something because you can always seem more intelligent or discerning if you say, I don't know about that. Whereas if you speak out on behalf of something and say, I think this thing is really great, or I think this person is really great, you're opening yourself up to a much greater risk in terms of how you're perceived by other people at Valve. Whereas if you said, yeah, I just don't think this person can cut it, you're really taking zero risk whatsoever. That's a very safe reaction to have.
And of course, what's going to be considered riskier? Hiring someone that looks like...
People with low ethics, low morals will do anything. Sell out their teammates, one toxic person to rule them all. Yeah, it is I've seen it. I've seen it in action. And like, I've seen an entire department of 50 people split into factions and completely destroyed in terms of an office culture by one bad toxic person. And so like, I am fully cognizant and in agreement with the idea of how important hiring the right people is for any situation. Like I said, like, humans are social creatures, like, you know, and like, I'm not saying that people can't figure things out, and like, but like, if you have a toxic person and like they are on a warpath just to cause damage, like, if you don't have a fluid organizational structure where you're like critiquing one another and stuff like that, and like, you know, it's more rigid, let's say, yeah, they can do a lot of damage real fast. And so like, I am all for making the right choices, or like being discerning anyway. You never really know. Someone could interview really well and look really good on paper and then turn out to be a monster. But like, you know, I don't think it's an issue being discerning.
You and sounds like you, or hiring someone from a completely different background altogether.
There's nothing in an overt, sinister sense that's discriminatory about the Valve hiring process, except in the way that all hiring processes select for people that are like the people doing the hiring. However, there are two compounding problems facing Valve. There's the existing demographic profile of Valve, but also the hiring process is so incredibly stringent and so difficult to pass people through, you're even less likely to get a diverse group of people at the end of it. To get hired at Valve, you basically have to not get vetoed by anybody you've encountered in the hiring process, and so you're saying the hole you have to fit through is so incredibly narrow. And there are already more middle-aged white guys in the games industry than any other group of people, so those few who make it through are most likely going to be from that group.
Multiple current and former employees tell me they believe this issue is not being addressed because Valve's leadership...
I don't know how much more of this I can take, seriously. Like, oh my god. I don't know what to say. Like, I get it. Okay, I get it. Diversity, important, like all that sort of stuff. But like, if we're just going to measure this by some capitalistic, ingenuine capitalistic tool here, like, there's no point going through this anymore. I think there's been some very interesting insights about like the minutia of like how a flat structured organization would work, where people are free to move between projects and work on what they want to and contribute what they like, and add value where they're necessary to the organization. But like, yeah, dude John the Duncan on Co-ops, he critiques it hard. Some say bigger than music and movie industries put together. Yeah, massive money in those industries. Yeah, massive. John Duncan on Co-ops. I actually want to have a look at Mondragon. I don't know how to actually write that properly or pronounce that. Mondragon, I think it is. Mondragon. Mondragon? Mondragon? I wonder if there's any YouTube videos on that. Mondragon, yeah. 10 years ago. Alright, let's try this one. It's only 5 minutes. Oh my god, it's the World Economic Forum. That's hilarious. And Chomsky comes up. Yeah, Chomsky. This one's only 2 minutes. Let's just have a look.
Cualquier empresario del exterior le dirá que lo más importante sea sacar el máximo beneficio. Nosotros decimos que la rentabilidad y el beneficio es importante para sostener a la empresa, pero que también es muy importante la generación de empleo.
We believe that it isn't good for anybody if somebody loses their job. If you lose your job, you haven't got money. If you haven't got money, you can't buy. If you can't buy, you can't buy our product.
El reparto de la riqueza más equitativa llega a más personas y por lo tanto más personas tienen la posibilidad de vivir más o menos bien.
La empresa es nuestra, pero somos trabajadores también, ¿no? Entonces no hay como un jefe que pueda haber en otras empresas, ¿no? Todos somos nuestros jefes y todos tenemos que tirar para adelante con la empresa.
La gran mayoría de las personas se integre más, se envuelva más y por tanto podemos ser más competitivos y competir con la empresa más mejor del mundo. Es el futuro, entendemos, del mundo laboral también.
En aquella sociedad anónima era realmente la sensación de trabajar para otro, acabar la hora y a casa y se acabó. Esto es algo como que forma parte más de nuestra vida, ¿no? Porque tomamos parte desde la cabeza hasta la cola de la organización, ¿no?
Al final que tenemos trabajo, que es muy importante. Muchas veces hay empresas que son capitalistas, si hay un tipo de paro, pues vas a la calle. Habrá unos que salen mal y otros mejor, pero tienes trabajo, no te mandan a la calle.
Ya dejo la caña, vamos arriba, ¿eh?
Like the sound is horrible. I can't do that anymore. I'm sorry. World of finance. Interesting. Let's get a capitalist take on this, shall we? So Mondragon, if you don't know, is like a really famous like cooperative company that's from Spain. And like it's supposed to be like this shining example of like how cooperatives can actually work. It's got like arms and affiliate companies like all around the world, I believe. You know, basically, yeah, it works like a cooperative. There are critiques of it, but like, you know, it's got an interesting track record. This video is from a couple of years ago, so like that's post-COVID. So, or like kind of post-COVID. So we can have a look at like how this integrates now. Those farmers co-ops seem to be a pretty good thing. I don't really know much. I do like helping people and being part of a team and a community. I think it's only natural. I used to have a bank account with a credit union, but they got bought out by an insurance company. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, you know, under the capitalist mode, like, you know, things get eaten, and like, and like, you know, absorbed into the system. That's going to happen with Mondragon. It's probably going to happen with the company that we're looking at before, Valve Corporation. Like, unless like this becomes a regular occurrence in the capitalist world order and you start to see more and more of this, like it will kind of just disappear and then come back to life again and disappear. But like if it gains traction in a large enough scale and becomes really, really competitive with capitalist modes of doing things, then like you will start to see a shift. I guess everyone kind of likes being part of something. We are social beings. It's a good point. It's a great point. All right, let's see what they have to say about Mondragon.
This 22,000-person town of Mondragon in Spain's Basque region is home to the world's largest worker cooperative network. The Mondragon Corporation was founded half a century ago by a young priest named Jose Maria Arizmendi Arrieta and some of his acolytes. Today, Mondragon is an advanced industrial economy within itself competing in global markets. The cooperative has found a way, crisis after crisis, to keep growing. Mondragon operates under the values of participation, innovation, social responsibility, and cooperation. The critical purpose of the firm is to benefit its members rather than its shareholders. The Mondragon system is one of 4 case studies analyzed in The Capital and The Debt Trap, a research monograph which summarized evidence claiming that cooperatives tend to last longer and are less susceptible to perverse incentives and other problems of organizational governance than more traditionally managed organizations. Workers in Mondragon have the right to participate in a democratic decision-making governance structure. They are given skill trainings and social safety nets to ensure sustainable employment, and they experience a work culture of solidarity and alliances. Interest in the Mondragon Corporation's time-tested model has surged. An increasing number of workers and business.
Who brought it up before? I think it was you, Nuvo. You brought up the fact that there's heaps of AI scripted content out there. I reckon this is an AI scripted piece of content. Like, listen to the way the guy's talking. Listen to like the way that like I don't know, the structure of what he's saying as well, or the AI actor is saying, and like the generic footage that they're using. There's like some Mondragon footage in there, but there's a lot of really generic footage being used. I reckon this is an AI piece of content. I think the credit unions came out of the unions so people could buy their own home. Teachers Credit Union was, my old man was a member of a teachers credit union. Was a member and a teacher. Well, yeah, I remember people using credit unions a lot back in the day, but like you said, they get eaten by private organizations. He says a lot of cooperatives agree on what to produce, how to produce, and what to do with the profits. Forias, you've read a book or two on cooperatives, right? Do you have any suggestions for us?
Around the world are looking to this small town as a model to tackle wealth and income inequality. At the more than 100 cooperatives that form part of the Mondragon network, many of the workers are also owners. They set their own salaries in an annual vote and receive a share of their company's yearly profits. There are agreed upon wage ratios between executive work and field or factory work. As a rule, managers can only earn 6 times more than the lowest paid worker. At some companies, the gap is even smaller. Mondragon cooperatives are united by a humanist concept of business, a philosophy of participation and solidarity, and a shared business culture. The culture is rooted in a shared mission and a number of principles, corporate values, and business policies. The impact of Mondragon's vast corporate network, which employs 80,000 people globally, shows this type of business can be very successful. Many who are interested in starting their own worker cooperatives think that they need it as a new solution to old problems. The corporation's companies manufacture consumer goods, capital goods, industrial components, products, and systems for construction and services. Mondragon also runs Araski, one of the leading retail groups all over Spain and in southern France. Spain offers universal healthcare to its citizens, and Mondragon offers its own universal coverage system. The Mondragon pension system is now well aligned and fully integrated with the Spanish government system. Mondragon retirees receive 60% of their pension from the government and 40% from the Mondragon system. In total, they receive 80% of their former salary, enabling them to retire without having to make major shifts in their lifestyle. Considering that it's gotten so big, governance is also an issue that Mondragon has figured out really well, striking an important balance between the need for democratic decision-making and managerial discretion. Interest in worker co-ops tend to increase in times of crisis. For example, the number of such companies in the US doubled to more than 600 from 250 in the decade or so after the 2008 recession. The objective of the cooperative is not to produce rich people, it's to produce rich societies. It provides stable employment with some wealth-building opportunities. Co-ops also have the potential to
not rich people, but rich societies. Like, that is so AI scripted. It's not funny. Like, I'm sure this is. You should do you want community wealth building or specific co-ops? Look at Emily Romagna in Italy. If you want to cover community wealth building, you should find things from Matthew Brown, the Labour councillor in England. They supported co-ops all the time. Thank you. Thank you, Forias. And keep an eye out, chat, if you are interested.
allay some concerns that underpin the Great Resignation, such as frustrations about not having a say in workplace decision-making. According to an analysis of all businesses in Uruguay between 1997 and 2009, worker cooperatives have a 29% smaller chance of closure after controlling for variables such as industry. In Italy, worker crowd cooperatives that have been created by workers buying a business when it is facing a closure or put up to sale have a 3-year survival rate of 87%, compared to 48% of all Italian businesses. A study of Spanish and French worker cooperatives found that they have been more resilient than conventional enterprises. Although there are many different worker cooperatives that have a wide variety of internal structures, workers' cooperatives are organized to serve the needs of worker owners by generating benefits for the worker owners rather than external investors. This worker-driven orientation makes them fundamentally different from other corporations, but the model is not entirely absent of inequities. The Mondragon Corporation has many businesses in 32 countries, and not all of those are federated cooperatives. The rest are international production subsidiaries. Workers in those other locations are not members of the cooperatives, and thus do not participate in democratic governance. This structure has created a group of people who aren't owners, but whose labor Mondragon now depends on. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more.
Interesting.
World of
Interesting, and I think I've heard that critique. What was the guy calling you young dude a month or two ago? Carry the News, a song by Mott the People. I don't remember that. But welcome to the chat anyway. I'm glad you've joined us. Yeah, that's interesting because I've heard people critique Mondragon. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. And yeah, thanks for joining the chat. Hope you join up on the Discord. If you can see the link back there, if you want to have a chat about this type of stuff more often. And like, if you want to get notifications and stuff like that, join up to the Patreon. And like, I can actually send email notifications. I can't do that through YouTube. So yeah, those two links are in there. So yeah, thank you for joining the chat. But yeah, I've heard people criticize Mondragon because it's now moving towards a system where, like, because it's expanded so much, it starts to hire labor that is done through the capitalistic relation, obviously. And then so like people that are laboring for the Mondragon enterprise at some point are not actually members at all. They're not involved in the decision-making process. So like, it's just turning into a capitalist machine, and you know, basically hiring wage laborers by extension, because it's working at such a broad scale. So that's unfortunate, but like, you know, this is the capitalist mode of production. It happens, but like, it does show you, it's a good example of how a cooperative idea can be rather successful, and can kind of resolve some of the issues of the capitalist system in terms of contradictions. Like, what are the contradictions of capitalism? Like, the major contradiction of capitalism is how, like, it requires labor to exist. So labor is really important because they produce value. Not only produce value, but they produce the surplus value, which leads to the actual real profits of the system. But at the same time, like, what are the tactics of capital to kind of wreak a lot of its profits is by undermining the workers themselves. So paying them less, giving them worse conditions, making them more productive to squeeze more out of them so they can produce more surplus value per worker. And so the contradiction there being that capitalism kind of destroys the group of people it relies on to make all of its value. Where you see a company like Mondragon here is very much centered around, like this script had said, instead of making people rich, making the workers, the members, have kind of rich lifestyles and communities and all that sort of stuff. So it's about increasing the living standard as opposed to just focusing on profits, and that being the end goal all the time and the raison d'etre for everything that exists in a corporate structure. All right, so like that is kind of what I really wanted to do today. I wanted to kind of have a look at some examples of socialism or a transition to a socialist mode of production that are taking place within the yoke of capitalism. And like me and 4IS have talked about a lot in the past, we probably dedicated full podcast episodes to this in our podcast channel. And even before it was a separate channel, we just dedicated the whole kind of discussions to this idea that socialism could come as a result of like changes in the way that the companies are structured themselves. So you wouldn't need to have a social revolution that takes, the capitalist world by force all on its lonesome and tries to implement socialist ways of doing things. You could have socialism developing within the capitalist mode of production and coming to a point where it is fully competitive with the capitalist style of doing things, and then you could have your social revolution following that. So like, let's say if you had Mondragon or your Valve corporations at such an extent that they made up basically 50% of all the workplaces out there. So you have 50 that are under private ownership and controlled only for the profits of shareholders and the owners of those corporations. And then you had 50% that were run kind of by the workers and for the profit of the members themselves or the workers themselves. And like if you had a situation where that style of workplace arrangement, economic relations was becoming the majority, then it would be much easier to have a social revolution at that point, because all of the political decisions and like the ideologies, the culture in your society would be very much, it would be a no-brainer almost. They'd be like, yeah, this type of stuff can work. We've seen it work. We see it work all the time. It'd just be like ciphering through and picking the best options available. Give me a heads up if you want me to cover more co-op stuff or community wealth building. I got resources. Eroding capitalism. Eric Olenwright. Yeah. Thank you for the resources, 4IS. So yeah, look, that's what I wanted to cover today. And I think it was a good kind of exposition of potentials, of potential ways of working through a transformation in capitalism without going through the sexy social revolution path, whereas, overthrowing the system and death to the establishment, all that type of stuff. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me. Thanks for a lively chat. I wasn't able to keep up with everything, and I do apologize for that. But like, I really was focusing on the videos at the end there. But yeah, thanks for joining. And like, I think we might continue this and do another version of this one, because like there's a lot to be learned, and I didn't really debate with ChatGPT at all, unfortunately. Didn't get a chance to do that. So yeah, thank you for joining me. I don't know if I'm going to be doing anything over kind of that Christmas, New Year's period. My previous experience, to be honest, has been that like most people are off doing stuff anyway, and like viewership drops and it becomes unstable because people are really busy around the silly season. So I'm not going to do live streams for the next week or so. I'll still be releasing content, so keep your eye out. But yeah, thank you very much for all those who've joined me today. Nuvo Loredo, I hope I pronounced that properly. Beatrice, thank you. 4IS, thank you. Anyone else who's joined? Bootstrap and Jacob. It was nice to have you in the chat as well. Mary Ellen, great to have you all along for the ride today, and thank you for interacting. And yeah, I will probably be back with more live streams first thing in the new year. So yeah, I appreciate you joining me today. And to sign me off with the usual statement, I would like to say to you all, please remember, I am, you are, we are a MysterE. I will see you live stream in the new year.